Hello, everyone. We can say, I guess we could still say Chanukah Sameach, because we're like at the end of the last and 8th day of Chanukah. It's already the night, fall, but let's put it this way, the echo and the shadow of Chanukah is still upon us. And Chanukah is all about miracles, and especially the miracles of light, piercing darkness. So I want to make personal mention of an event that happened literally as the sun set, Mishatishka Chama on Zeis Chanukah, which means as the sun set on Zeis Chanukah. A friend of mine personally, and as well as a colleague, and someone that all the Jewish people have been praying for, his sentence was commuted from 27 years, and he was released from prison today. He's actually leaving now on his way home. His name is Shalom Mordechai Rabashkin. Shalom Mordechai Halevi Rabashkin ben Rivka and ben Avram Aaron. And there's been a spontaneous outburst of celebration in almost every Jewish community. You could see it on the WhatsApps as I was coming here. I see what's happening. He was sentenced for 27 years for pretty much white-collar crimes, a very disordinate and disproportionate sentence. And today he was commuted on the 8th day of Chanukah. And it seems to have touched a chord in so many people. And if you check it out, you'll see it's like the celebration that's going on. I'm coming now from Crown Heights. Crown Heights, the streets are filled with dancing people. And I see it also in Borough Park and almost every Jewish community around that is aware of this. So I just wanted to mention and say congratulations to him and his family who've gone through a serious ordeal. And no better time than on the 8th day of Chanukah. So whatever you think about Trump, God runs the show. No presidents ever run the show, good ones or bad ones. And I think it's important to realize that there's an expression, Leiv Melachim Esarim B'Yad Hashem, which means the heart of leaders and kings are in the hands of God. And even when we went through the worst of the czars and of fascists and despots, we always knew that there's a higher force at work. This has really nothing to do who's in office. We are all at the end of the day pawns. Either we're pawns of the political system or we're pawns of God. I think it's better to be a pawn of God than to be a pawn of someone that's buying you or hiring you. So it's really to his credit, and that's that. So I just wanted to make mention of that, being that we're concluding Chanukah. So somewhat of a miracle, especially for this family and the community that has risen up. Essentially, how it came about was that Trump got enough requests from senators and representatives, essentially asking him to make this commuting of the sentence. I'm sure more details will emerge as it goes, but I just wanted to mention it because it's literally just happened. And it's always a great simcha joy when you hear somebody is, no one's suggesting he was not guilty of anything, but the crime, rapists don't get 27 years. And here there was other things going on as well, obviously. But bottom line is, he's back home with his family. He's on his way, I think, to the Ohel, actually, which is in Queens, which is a long journey from Otisville, where he's coming from, I think, a 3-hour journey. So I wanted to just begin with saying that. And as I said, Chanukah is the celebration for all of us. Even though the events of Chanukah happened thousands of years ago, but who of us has not experienced darkness in our lives? And who has not experienced some form of setbacks or shadows that we call the darkness, which can take on many shapes, psychological, emotional, physical, financial. And Chanukah's message is that the flame never ceases to burn. And the power of the flame is always there. And ultimately the flame of hope and the flame of our souls and the flame of our faith does not get extinguished, even in the darkest of times. And that's really the Chanukah message and the power and the hope that Chanukah provides us all. And I think it's a relevant message to anyone, because we all go through darker times. We all go through times of anguish or agony or other types of anxiety, and the different fears that we all deal with, the different dark little corners and crevices in our psyches and our souls. So Chanukah's message is a message of light, and that a little light dispels much darkness, as I discussed at length last week. And as we conclude Chanukah, the topic that we'll be discussing is how to be a radical, what's the exact title? A radical warrior for goodness and kindness. How to be a radical warrior for goodness and kindness, which is an interesting name. The title was actually not given by me. It was given by suggested people and some people in my office. So I thought maybe it's a good way to begin is by posing a question. It's actually a challenge, maybe a provocative question to everybody, to ourselves, and ask yourself this question. I mean, it's rhetorical. I'm going to obviously be talking about it. But the question is, if you were to list the top 5 things that you're most passionate about, that you're most excited about, that you obsess about, that you're ready to fight for, what would they be? What would those 5 things be? And again, you don't have to answer loudly, answer to yourselves. And because the answer to that question is going to definitely reflect not necessarily who you fundamentally are, but what your current state of being is, your current involvements, your priorities, your choices. Because the places where we are passionate is usually a sign that's where our head and heart is at. For good or for bad. I'm not discussing whether it's a healthy passion or not, and so on. Fact of the matter is, even though most people don't like to admit it, most people's passion, especially in our free world, is really mostly about pretty superficial and shallow things. Things that don't last long, instant gratification, different pleasures that are maybe give us some momentary satisfaction or contentment, but they are things like sports, entertainment, money, sexuality, and many other things that we pursue. And we may not be proud, or we may even be embarrassed by some of that, especially when the question is posed. But at the end of the day, you look at yourself and you say, okay, what are the things I'm most excited about? What really excites me? So I want to pose the challenge after asking this question, that imagine for a moment that if your list of 5 things would include things like the pursuit of goodness and kindness, that you're obsessed and passionate about it. The radical warrior, that hence the title, radical warrior, ready to fight for that. Things like refined love, eternal values, helping another person. Now, we all believe in those values. Most people, I don't think I've met anyone that's ever said, I don't think helping other people is a good thing. Everyone mouths and pontificates how beautiful it is. The question is, where is your passion? The things that most passionate. It's very nice to say it's good to be kind, and it's good to be helpful, to be virtuous. But if you're more passionate about a video game, or about a football game, or about some other instant gratification, even though it may not even be bad, I'm not even getting into unhealthy vices and addictions, what does that say? That your values that you believe in are fine, but you're not excited about them as much as you are about other things. Now, this is not really meant to be a critique. I would say it's more of a social critique of the social world in which we live. The world in which we live does not educate us necessarily to be excited about eternal things, about the big picture, about long term, about eternity in general. We trained and we grow up in a very, I would say, spoiled world, a prosperous world. So it doesn't mean we're all prosperous, but it means we live in a world of a lot of indulgence. I think most people would agree with that. And indulgence lends itself to embracing and becoming addicted to things that are not very necessarily meaningful and don't last long. The sad irony is that when we lived in darker times, in times when we were not so successful and not so free, we're really free. We are physically free to do as we see fit. We may be psychologically imprisoned, maybe deeper than ever, but physically we're free. You can move about where you want. You could go to any school you like. You could be as religious or not religious as you wish. Nobody's imposing their values or their standards on you. And ironically, when there was a time that it was not like that, when we were under the pressures, and I speak for all people, not just for Jews. Jews always are they call the miner's canary. If they're suffering, they seem to be the ones that suffer first or more acutely. But for Jews as well, you could not go to any school you like, and you could not practice religion freely. I mean, just go back 70, 80 years ago, what was going on in Europe. and what was going on in the former Soviet Union, and prior to that in Tsarist Russia and Eastern Europe, and the pogroms, the inquisitions, and the Middle Ages, and the expulsions, and the excommunication, and the killings, and the genocides. And, I mean, the list goes on. You know, they say there's more Jewish blood in the rivers of Europe than water. And then you go back to the Crusades. So we live in a world like that, but interestingly, when people were under the gun like that, and under such pressure, they far more crystallized their values, because that's all they had. They didn't have the freedom to just hang around and say, what am I doing now? Nothing special today. And just have a lot of free time and leisure, which we have. So the great blessing of our freedom comes with a very heavy price, and that's the price of a lot of free time, a lot of leisure, which you can really argue is not necessarily great for the human spirit to have so much free time. And I've talked about this theme many, many times, how it tends to lead to apathy and complacency and indifference. And yes, a lack of crystallized values. I'm, as you know, I'm an optimistic person. I always like to look at the positive things. But I rue the results of any survey that would ask young men and women of this country, and I'm using America simply as an example. Maybe America is the symbol of the free Western world, but the same could be Europe, the same could be other places in the world. Ask young men and women in their teens, what are the things that you're most obsessed with? I don't think you're going to find values being even in the list. It's not on the list. It won't even be on the top 10. It may be the pursuit of a good education, maybe the pursuit of women or men, depending on who you ask. It may be the pursuit of what their parents and the society puts pressure on them to ultimately be successful and build a career. And just look at the obsession with the music and fun and sports. Again, I'm not talking about whether it's healthy or unhealthy, but definitely you don't have there anything of values. I'm not saying no one's going to say that. And remember, what people say and what they do is not always equal either, as I mentioned. They may say it because it doesn't sound very correct. If someone asks you and you're an intelligent 18-year-old boy or girl, what are your top 10 things, and you don't even mention once being a good person, it doesn't sound good. But the question is that really where they're putting their energy into? And we all know that a lot of the answer will be dependent very much on what kind of home you grow up in. If the home did inculcate values, and that was a priority, then by osmosis, that will usually affect the children in that home. But if the home did not, it's not coming from television, it's not coming from the internet, it's not coming from social media, whereas the blind leading the blind in one vicious cycle. So it's really sad, and both, it can cry and laugh at the same time, because on one hand, we have such freedoms. We really have freedoms. We really can do whatever we want. And yet, we do not know how to use freedom properly. Freedom does not bring the best out of us. So clearly, and I'll make it very clear, we're not talking about turning back the clock. It's just an important observation, more important, I think it's a vital observation to understand the nature of the human being when left with their own recourse and really without any pressure and without deadlines and without focus. Most people will gravitate to the lowest common denominator. And that is the fact and the reality in a type of godless society or a secular society that's not driven by a mission or a cause. And to me, when you hear about the latest scandals and the whole uproar of the Me Too movement, the sexual harassment, it's not something that happened this year. We know this is more of a thing going on for maybe all of history. But now it's exploded. And the good news is, at least being talked about, and not just under the cover. But what is it really reflecting? It's reflecting on when people are in power, they can do whatever they like. They feel they can do whatever they like. They have no one to answer to. And everyone becomes part of the game. I don't want to call it game, if you know what I mean. I mean the game, I mean the routine. And some people are deeply hurt, and some of them are coming out now, and thank God they can speak up and let them get justice and let them get some type of closure if they can. But many that are not going to talk about how much they have in a sense, been complicit in it. In other words, the bottom line is, you want to climb the corporate ladder, you want to make it, you have to pay a price. And some of those prices are sexual, and some prices are your own pride and your own sense of dignity. And it's really a real big topic. Because let's say you can even find all the criminals that have imposed themselves to non-consensual and predatory behavior, rape, and so on. That everybody agrees is criminal. But what about all the consensuals? The consensual suddenly like great? You know, when people are married and people have relationships and commitment, and where's the loyalty and where's the sanctity? So it's to me, it's a great topic. I don't say, let me rephrase. I don't mean it's a great topic. It's a great opportunity to talk about these things because it exposes what indulgence can do when it's unchecked and when there's no accountability and there's no higher standards and there's no sanctity. I mean, come on. Is there a show on television? Is there a movie where you see sanctity in relationships? You don't see anything of that. People are with each other, they sleep with each other, they commit to each other without any real commitment, and that's the standard in our society today. And I'm not speaking as a rabbi now or as a religious person and a type of fire and brimstone. I'm just making an observation that anyone can make an observation of this that needs to be addressed. So this is just another consequence of a society that on one hand has such great blessings and another has no higher standard to live up to. So when you get the blessing of freedom and you don't have anything to stand for, what do you think happens? Your indulgence leads you to all type of stuff that has nothing to do with really becoming greater people. You would think if someone was an outsider and said, what an age, the technological age, look at how much technology they have. Look at their ability to communicate with each other. Look at the ability to what human beings have done in the fields of medicine and science and in communications. You'd think, wow, they must be the most refined generation that ever existed. That's what would seem to be on paper. And then when you look a little closer, you say, no, not at all. Technology has not made us more refined. Technology has not improved marriages. They've not improved the welfare of family life. They've not improved the sanctity of relationships. You know, technology is a great tool to be able to indulge further. As they would say, I don't know if they still say it, but in the early days of the computer age, they would always say junk in, junk out. Garbage in, garbage out. A computer crunches numbers. If the numbers are good numbers, it'll crunch it faster. If it's bad stuff, it'll spread it faster. Look, gossip, technology is like the best way to get gossip immediately. Everybody should know about it. And so technology is neutral, like all tools are neutral. You know, a hammer, a nail, a screwdriver, a telephone, an automobile, these are all neutral tools. A knife, depends what you use it for. If you use it for something good, it improves things. If you use it for something bad, it also can, in an accelerated way, also cause more damage. Look, think of nuclear energy. Think of nuclear power. Think of all these tremendous forces that we are able to unleash today. So if someone says, fire a good thing or a bad thing? Fire, without warmth, we wouldn't exist. We need warmth. Our bodies need warmth. We need the sun's warmth. We need warmth in the emotional sense of the word. What happens if it's out of control? Then you get burned by warmth. Same thing with water. We need water. But if too much is a flood, too little is a famine, is a suffocation. Yeah. So life is about the finding the balance. And the same thing is with all. Freedom is a great blessing, one of the greatest of all. But it has to all be harnessed. And if it's not harnessed, so it's an excellent question to ask, where are you most passionate? Where do your passions and excitement, what do you get exhilarated by? What are you ecstatic about? What's euphoric? You know? And where would you jump and scream in celebration? Something happens, you know. And unfortunately, we live a lot vicariously through others. This is what the media age has created. And I know people who are obsessed, they have to watch their soap operas. And if they can't watch it, they'll record it, you know, the whole thing. And they say, what about your own life? You know, they're more obsessed with someone else's life than their own, because that's a great escape. You live through the drama and the ups and downs. Why do I have to suffer myself? I see how other people suffer, and I can vicariously live through them. And that's what happens. Sports is a beautiful thing. You see athletes, you see people who excel, who are able to achieve almost superhuman type of feats. But where it goes wrong is if you start living vicariously instead of you doing it. It's like, what do they say about baseball? or for any sport for that matter, there's 70,000 people in a stadium that need to lose weight watching 9 people who don't, or 18 people who don't, and we live vicariously. Someone says, so what are you into? I'm into sports. What do you do? I watch football every Sunday. You think he's into sports means you play sports. No, that's not. So the point is that to answer the questions, what you're excited about and what you're ready to fight for is a vital way of really getting a litmus test, like almost a report card of what matters to you, what's important. And sadly, as I said, most people, when you really push comes to shove, their list is not going to be very impressive. It'll probably be very embarrassing. What excites them? What are they ready to fight for? And I actually have tested this. I've asked young people, what are you ready to fight for? Americans haven't had to fight a war on this soil for, thank God, since the Civil War. And I let it always be that way. I mean, we've been attacked, 9/11, other things like that. But I mean, as a war. And most people, what war do we have to fight for? There was a time, yes, America fought the Revolutionary War. It fought other wars for certain values. World War II was a real war against the Axis, the Nazis, who wanted their own obscene vision of the earth, of the world, to destroy anything or to subjugate anyone that doesn't fit their vision. It forced America to look at itself, are we part of war or not? And also that dragged its feet until Pearl Harbor was attacked, basically American pride. And then they had to go into the war. So the blessing of freedom also creates a blessing of what are you ready to fight for? I always tell the joke about Israel, where a guy gets up in the Knesset, which is Israel's parliament, and says, I have the solution to all our problems. Instead of fighting with Arabs, let's attack the United States of America. Everyone looks at him shocked. Let's attack the United States. We get $20 billion of aid from them, Yeah, attack the United States of America. Of course, they'll beat us. But then, out of guilt, they'll rebuild us as they did Japan and Germany after World War II. So more than 20 billion, we'll get a lot more money. Okay, interesting idea. Very innovative Jewish thinking. An old man gets up in the back of the Knesset and says, that's a very nice idea, in his thick accent, he says. But what happens if we win? What happens if Israel wins? What do we do then? That's a good plan if we lose. And that, in a way, captures so much of, in a humorous way, so much of what's going on in Israel as well, frankly. And that is, the Jews are excellent at playing defense. We've survived it all. Nobody could vanquish us. We know every defense. We know how to fight against enemies and survive. But what about offense? Let's say you have now freedom. What do you stand for? Tell me, what's your vision for tomorrow? And the way when 2,000 years you've been fighting against something, you get so used to be against, you don't even know what it means to be for something. When Israel became a state, so there was a certain euphoria and unity, even though there were disagreements by different Jewish groups, but there was a certain common understanding we have a homeland. Question is how, whether it's what form of homeland it should be and how religious it should be and not religious. Finally, there were debates, there were anti-Zionists, and there were different types, there are probably, I think, 12 variations of Zionism. Did you know that? The one that prevailed in 1948 was the Ben Gurion version, which was the agrarian socialist Zionism, which was working the land, the kibbutz, very socialist. But there were others. There was spiritual Zionism, and there was industrialist type of Zionism, economic Zionism. There were different things. There were Jabotinsky. There were all types of Zionism. The point being is that, but homeland, that pretty much, that's what you see in Israel. You really see all walks of life. There's great yeshiva systems and synagogues, a renaissance of Jewish life, and the different forms. I'm not getting now into the details and the politics of it. But that we have now the homeland, and we fought for the homeland, and Israel is now a strong army, and a strong defense, and a strong economy, and a strong technology. So now what? So you ask young men and women in Israel, similar to the United States, they say, yeah, I understood what I stood for when I fought against the enemies, so we should have a homeland. We should not be any longer at the mercies of the Nazis or the Europeans or others. We now have our own control of our own home. Okay, now what? What's your vision for tomorrow? And very few can provide that. So it's one thing, make sure we don't lose, but it's another thing when you win, what do you do then? So sometimes winning is harder than losing, to be honest. Because losing, you lose, okay, then you pick yourself up and you have something to fight for. Winning forces you now to become a leader. And what do you stand for? So therefore, that's why it's completely logical how we've become our warrior side, so to speak, our passions. And what we fight for is about things that are pretty much superficial. Because we're not used to really standing, and we've gotten spoiled, and we have not been challenged or forced to stand up for what you really want to fight for. My father was born in Moscow. He told me often about the fear that they lived in. And his father was an activist, Jewish activist, involved in trying to build Jewish life in different communities under Stalin, at the threat of death any given moment. He fought for this. It was 24/7 his war. It was a war. And it was with complete passion and complete, what's the word I want to use? Obsession even. A good obsession. An obsession to do it. He was arrested. Thank God he came out of there. He was arrested for what they call counter-revolutionary activity. Basically meant he's trying to open a synagogue or something like that. And yes, thousands and thousands were shot and killed for this type of activities. The point is there was a cause to fight for. Today, we have the freedoms. The question is, what cause will we fight for? So this is a challenge, an opportunity as well, to ask ourselves these questions. And really, to be able to answer it properly, I think we need to probe and explore and go a little deeper into who we are. Even if you were to make your top 5 list of passions and things you're ready to fight for, would come across as being pretty superficial or shallow values, then the next question I would ask you is, are you proud of these list of 5? Do you consider them to be the best you can be? There I can guarantee you very few people will say that sports and entertainment and soap operas and the other things I list and the different immediate pleasures, yes, that's who I am. Very few people are going to say that. They say that's where I am right now, but that's not who I am. So what's really happening here is not just there's a tragedy that we are involved in all kinds of short-term pleasures and gains that don't really have any lasting impact. There's something deeper going on. You're not actualizing who you really are. So this takes me back again to that example, that when we live under pressure, pressure tends to bring out the best in you. What they say about women, that women are like tea bags. You don't know how strong they are until you put them into hot water. But the truth is everybody's that way. To use exactly a Hanukkah metaphor, Hanukkah, even though we can light candles, but optimally you try to use olive oil. And how is olive oil produced? Through pressing olives. Pressure. And as the Talmud says, that the olive doesn't produce oil until you press it. As a matter of fact, the art of the oil press, the art of oil production is a pretty complicated art, just like the art of wine production. It's not just getting the oil, it's squeezing, knowing how to press it. There's a second press, a third press, which is a better oil. So pressure is key. But that's given as well. Everything in life, the most precious stones that we value are all produced under pressure. A diamond, natural pearls. You know how natural pearls are formed? Where do they come from? Natural pearls. So they come from oysters. A natural pearl is an oyster that has a very soft underbelly, very, very sensitive skin, and if a piece of dust or something irritates that skin, you can imagine like a piece of dust on your eyeball. It can be very irritating. So what does the oyster do to protect itself, to get rid of the irritation? It secretes a fluid, a white, thick fluid, that hardens around the piece of dust and becomes a pearl. So what we call pearls that are expensive and beautiful pearls is basically really an oyster trying to get rid of a pain in the butt of its thick in its skin. on its soft skin. Interesting, right? Just like many perfumes are really a result of some very non-pleasant odor coming from a skunk or from musket or from other animals, and you get rid of the toxic part that makes it, and then you're left with a beautiful, powerful perfume. I mean, there are synthetic pearls and they're synthetic, but we're talking about the natural thing. So some of the most powerful things in life that we consider so valuable really just came out of some pressure that somebody dealt with. And the truth is also in our case. I don't know the statistics, but I remember a while back, that the greatest innovations in history, 80% of them happened due to some type of trauma or suffering of a person or a situation that led to the innovation that was discovered. I mean, just on the most basic, they say war is the father of all invention. Some of the greatest inventions are a result of war. You want to know one of them? It's called the internet. The internet was developed by the US military at the end of World War II because they were looking for a way to communicate in a discreet way, and telephones were not good enough, telegraph was not, so they created the internet. Internet is a complete product of war, survival, as are so many other of our technologies. Not going to say every one, but many happened either due to some pressure or a person who was going through a lot of difficulties and that brought out the best in them, the fight in them. And you'll always see pressure precedes greatness and growth. Now, we don't like to hear that always because we like the end result. Give me the reward without the effort. It doesn't work that way. The oil through pressure. So the interesting thing then is this whole discussion of what we're ready to fight for and what we're passionate, besides the fact that we end up becoming very mediocre and being involved in the things that are quite, as I said, shallow, superficial, etc., we also completely do not express what we're capable of. Because that same indulgence means you're just not forced to go deeper. So the challenge is also one that is necessary for you to be the best you can be. It's important for you to say, you know what, this list of the things I'm excited about is not only embarrassing, it also doesn't even reflect what I really am about. And very often this is what you see. You see people who have those comforts are not forced to have to excel and definitely not forced to dig and find their deeper resources. But when you begin to do that, you begin to pressure yourself, what comes out is unbelievable stuff, beautiful stuff. Whenever I speak to people who are going through difficult times, I say, look, right now it's very difficult, but see it through, and you'll recognize that this difficult moment will be a catalyst for unbelievable greatness. You have to know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is not the lights of the oncoming train. It's actually a light as you reach greater place. Now, many people in that difficult moment can't really understand that. They don't hear it even. They say, what are you talking about? I'm right now completely overwhelmed. You say, you have to remember there's something more than you don't see everything. We don't see everything. And it's critical because we can sometimes become demoralized by our own darkness and not see it through and just allow it to envelop us and control us, and you don't continue the journey. And you don't continue the journey, you're definitely not going to see the light. So then you end up becoming paralyzed by your own fears and so on. So the critical thing is to recognize that there is much more and you don't see it. It's all right, nothing wrong with that. None of us know the mysteries of life. There's so much we don't know. So what's wrong with having a little humility and realize that wherever you're at, there's a lot more. But you have to have the faith and the trust and the fortitude to forge ahead, even if you're not in the mood of it. Because moods is definitely not will get you anywhere. When people tell me not in the mood, I say, since when is it all about your mood? Is that what you want to be controlled by, your moods? And people answer, what else do I have besides my mood? I said, you have a lot of resources you can't even see. Your mood is not letting you see your own resources. But that's another form of indulgence. My mood, I'm not in the mood. That's another line that you hear a lot. And I don't like to criticize anybody, but whenever I hear that, it always rattles me. I say, well, you're not in the mood? Do you want to be a happy person? Or you're not in the mood of becoming happy? Is that what you're saying to me? You're not in the mood. it becomes like almost a self-indulgent thing. I'm not in the mood, and I'll get in the mood, I'll do it. Life is not about your moods. Life is about a higher cause. It's not about you. It's about what you're going to accomplish with your life. And that's the first step necessary for any type of movement. A person gets themselves out of the way, big things happen. You put yourself in the way, then you become the problem. You're your own worst enemy, as they say. So really, so then it's about discovering that inner dimension. Now, how do you do that? There's several ways. One way is, as I've always mentioned, is learn about it. Learn about what makes you tick. Learn about your soul. Learn about your potential. The first times I remember being exposed to some of the Kabbalistic and mystical and Hasidic teachings, you get this X-ray of your soul. It's unbelievably fascinating. It's like, well, this is what you're made of. It's very fascinating. You suddenly realize you're made of a lot more than you think you're made of. You really have a lot of power inside of you. You have faculties, and you have potentials, and you have hidden faculties, and you have all kinds of hidden potential. And there's a whole superconscious state that does not even meet, the naked eye cannot meet. And you don't have to be super intelligent to know that what you see is not what you get. Would you ever say that what you see in the mirror is who you are? Or even what you express to other people is who you are? We all know there's more to us, that means the eye, and more to us that others know. It's more than we even know. So how do you discover what you're capable of? Only pressure. And I don't mean necessarily bad pressure. Pressure means something has to compel you. Now, sometimes what compels you is, yes, darkness. A person who's agonizing, that itself can become a springboard. But sometimes what drives you can be simply recognizing that you have these strengths and recognizing that you really want to make something with your life. You really want to live up to what you're capable of, not what you're doing. Like I always say, not who you are, but who you are rather than what you're doing. Who you are shouldn't be a product of your actions. Your actions should be a product of who you are. So the first thing you want to be committed, are you committed to yourself? And it would be sad if someone says, no, I'm not. I'm not committed to myself. I'm not committed to me being fulfilling and realizing what I'm capable of. People say that. And we ask, how could you say such a thing? They say, because I don't believe in myself. And I've been beat up so many times. And I loathe myself. And I don't have any self-esteem. Those are absolutely very devastating forces that work against you. But that's your war. Are you going to let those voices control and tell you who you are? You're going to let the negative voices telling you that you're worthless to tell you who you are? And what happens as a result? That the real you, that is capable of things, simply doesn't have a place to express itself because you yourself are beating yourself up. Or you're confirming or validating that, and affirming and validating that negative self-image. So you say, so then it's a vicious cycle. How do you get yourself out of it? Well, that's why we have each other. You go to someone objective who you invite them to kick you in the pants and tell you that you're wrong. But you have to invite them. And you have to say, many of us go to someone because we just want them to also agree with us. That's not what you want. You want friends that don't agree with you. In a good way. I don't mean someone who's there to insult you or hurt you or abuse you or just likes to be negative. We're talking about people that you can feel that you trust and love. The best thing in life is to get critique from someone you love. Because number one is this, is that you know that they care about you. So there's no other agenda going on. And number two, they're actually telling you the truth instead of just telling you what you want to hear or what you like to hear. It's not easy, but that's reality. And obviously I deal with this myself a lot. It's always easier to give other people advice than to give yourself advice, as we all know. I'm sure you all give brilliant advice to your friends, and then you look in the mirror and you say, 1 second, why don't I take my own advice? Because when it comes to yourself, we're blinded. We don't see it quite that way. We say, I'm different or something like that. We find some. So that's number one is two things I said here so far, not one thing, two things. One is learn about yourself and learn about your great potential. And number two, find objective friends that can help you get you out of your stuck place. Those are two tremendous tools. Don't underestimate them. That can get you moving. Is it solve all your issues? No one's going to help. You can only help someone who's ready to help, who wants to help themselves. But you could get help. Like if someone's in a pit, they can't get themselves out of the pit, so they need someone to throw them a rope. But what happens if you throw a rope and the guy doesn't want to grab the rope? You can't do anything. You need both. You need, as Hillel says, Imena nili mili, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? And if I'm only for myself, what will I be? Mani, what am I? So how do you reconcile? Very simple. It has to start with something, some initiative of your part. But you also recognize, I need help and support. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not extreme or another. It's not like someone else is going to save you. And it's not like you have to do everything yourself. It's a combination of your effort plus reaching to others that can help you in areas that you may not be clear about or blinded to, and so on. And what's at stake is your real potential. What's at stake is not only your potential, your purpose of why you're here on this earth. To me, that's a pretty good, strong reason to make you be obsessive of trying to figure out what your mission in this world is. And when I hear that, and I was a few months ago, spoke to a group of college students, and I asked them the simple question. I said, no business on earth can function without a mission statement. Can you function without a mission statement? If a business can't function without a mission statement, how can an individual function without a mission? And I asked them this question as well as, what are you obsessed with? And what are you consumed by? And what are you passionate about? And they gave me all their different answers. So I said, are you as passionate about finding your mission in this life, why you were sent here, why you exist? Isn't that like the thing you should be most passionate about more than building a career? It would be like someone saying, I'm passionate about building a very good tool chest. And someone asks you, what are you going to do with this tool chest? Oh, I didn't figure that out yet. And they all, I could tell you, they were so intrigued by this. They said no one ever talked about it. And I understood that we're not told. We're not told about this, not at home, not in school, not in the media. So where do you figure this out? You usually figure it out through trial and error, or sometimes when it's quite, not to say too late, but sometime in the middle of your life, you suddenly say, 1 second here, I'm busy with all kinds of things. I don't even know why I'm doing all of it. That's one of the tragedies of our time, that we're not forced to ask that question. I was in Argentina last week for 6 days. So Friday night I spoke for a group of young women at like a Shabbaton. So there was a local, they have like a school there. But for this, once a year they have an annual, for Yutas Kislev, they have an annual retreat. So they had a few hundred young women, aged 18 to 24. And I spoke about this right before Shabbat began, or actually right after candlelighting. I spoke about the idea of finding your mission. I spoke in English. Most of them were English speaking, but there was some Spanish, so they had the simultaneous, someone translated to them, called echo translation. And then I have a talk later, then they had dinner, we had dinner together, and then there was another talk afterwards. I talked about stereotype, right? Another intriguing topic about stereotypes, religion. But then came questions. And I could tell you, we sat till 4 o'clock in the morning, literally. And everyone was very quite tired. You're talking about Friday night, that they travel and so on, but they wouldn't leave. They were so taken and intrigued by this mission thing. They didn't even talk about anything else I spoke about. That was the thing that got them. And this you can't make it up. And I saw what resonated in young people. And this was very eclectic. There was a student of journalism there. There was people in business school. Very eclectic, different group of people. Some more observant, some not. Very big mix. But everybody was intrigued by that. And that's not surprising to me. And I said, this is the time in your life, because now you're at a crossroads. You have not yet made the big decisions of your life. What career you're going to pursue, who you're going to marry, where you're going to live. This is the time. Once you're on the other side and you're already so-called on the merry-go-round of life, going 90 miles an hour, it's very hard to just stop and say, why am I here? But the truth is, it's a question all of us have to ask any given time, just as Adam was asked by God, Ayeka, where are you? And as the Balatan, the Alter Rebbe, in connection to the 19th of Kislev said, that's a question, the universal and eternal question asked to each one of us, where do you stand? What have you done with your life? Are you living up to your potential? So that should be, in my opinion, the number one obsession. If someone were to say of the top 5, number 1 is to find why am I here, that would bring a big smile to my face if someone said that. But obviously now I've said it, I'm sure some people will use it, but I'm talking about sincere and authentic. And the proof is in the pudding. Are you ready to commit if you're passionate about something and you're obsessed with something, you sure make it a priority. If someone tells me they're passionate about something and they say to me, I'm going to get there in 5 years from now, come on, what does that tell you? Yeah, very passionate. Okay, it's like delayed passion. Okay, one day I'm going to do it. Like that type of thing. No. Passion is very clear. Your passion means you're going to pursue it. There's nothing to talk about. So basically, it's really coming to look at yourself in a deeper way. It's an interesting thing. Not lately, but there was a time, this class, when we were at 6th Street and other places, maybe also once in a while it happens now, and I didn't even know it at the time, giving the class, and I saw for a number of times, I saw young couples, young, I don't know what age, whatever young means, and I saw that they were like on a date, you could tell. And I thought, okay, very interesting, they came, but then someone told me that, you know what, I'm bringing this woman on a date here because your class is a great way to find out what she's like. Because either she's not interested at all in this type of ideas, or she's going to be stimulated and we're going to have a good argument and talk about it. Instead of me having to provoke, you do it and I see. And then I started realizing that it was not two people. I at least remember at least 30, 40, 50 different couples. Either the girl bringing the boy, or the boy bringing the man bringing the woman, or the woman the man, and like they're testing them out. And I always said to them, tell me what happens. So I remember one woman called me afterward the next day, she said, forget about it, he's out. He didn't have any interest in anything you said. So I said, maybe I'm not the right teacher. She said, no, the ideas didn't bother. He wasn't interested in anything, these things intrigue me. He's not even intrigued by it. And I didn't, it was the best. I said, maybe I should advertise. Great place to bring your date if you want to know where their ideological, existential state of mind is at. I found it to be quite amusing. It was interesting. I tried, and it shouldn't infect me when I saw the couples. I didn't try to put it, But the fact of the matter is, I remember even when I was working on Torah Meaning for Life, my book, so I had hired then Stephen Dubner, who later became famous in Freakonomics. So he was to be an editor of my book. So he was I worked with him closely, and at the time he was the youngest of 8 children to 2 Jewish parents who converted to Catholicism. He later wrote a book about that as well. But long story short, he was exploring his Judaism at the time. And he was dating somebody. I don't know who he was dating. But I remember he calls me once, it was like 11 o'clock at night, and I had just sent him the chapter on love that I had written. Love, intimacy, one of those 2 chapters. Love, intimacy, marriage, love, intimacy, 3 chapters. I think it was the chapter on love. I said, what do you call me 11 o'clock at night? And I thought he was like he got stuck with something, he wanted to have some. He says, you're making my whole love life miserable. I read this, what you're writing, and I look at my own life and relationship. It doesn't live up to any of this. I can't even look at my girlfriend anymore because of you. So I said, so what do you want to do? Sue me? What do you do? Maybe, And he told me, I said, he had 2 different girlfriends through the period of writing the book, and both of them he had to drop because they were not living up to what he was reading. I said, maybe you shouldn't take it to heart what I'm reading. He says, it resonates with me. So I found that to be humorous. And by his wedding, which he married a nice, very fine young woman, Jewish woman, he asked me to say a few words. I said, I have to say thank you. And I told the bride, you have to thank me because of me. Stephen dropped those girlfriends and has married you. So it means you did live up to those standards. Okay, so I felt like, how many times can you say that? That because of you, people break up their relationships. I didn't really mean it quite that way, but you get the idea. So the point I'm making here is that when you start studying and start learning about higher standards, you start thinking of yourself in a different way. The worst thing is to just hang around people that share your shallow and superficial interests and passions, so then you're just wallowing in your own little script. And maybe you'll be comfortable, but you're not going anywhere with that. What you want to do is expose yourself to greater ideas, to expose yourself, what is my soul really like? And then it resonates. And when it resonates, you say, 1 second, there's a whole part of me that's completely not being expressed and actualized. And that starts bugging you and making you uncomfortable, like the tea bag, and that pressures you to maybe do something about it. So it's learning about yourself really in a deeper way. It's being around people who are also on that level and they can challenge you and you want them to challenge you. And it's about, what was the third thing I said? I forgot already. But whatever it was. I don't remember what I just said. No, but everything I've been speaking about. You could always go back to the videotape. I don't know if I said a third thing. I was just speaking about how to recognize that part of yourself. And that helps you motivate you to want to access it. I mean, you look around, look at anyone that excels in anything. Musicians, athletes, anyone that in any of the arts, in business, in any work, what is excellence you'll see? The excellence means they push themselves to go further than their regular talent. A good coach will push a athlete and access strengths that they may not have seen. A good opponent will bring out the best in them because now they have to really prove themselves. So you're going to fight opponents that are inferior to you. You're not going to get to excellence. You'll win all the time. So you may feel good about that, but you're not going to achieve your excellence because you haven't played the best. So some people like that. They want to be around, want to be a big fish in a small bowl. And they're afraid to really go see, the big world, and then you really have to prove yourself. It could be the fear of failure. And then a person will say, listen, I feel comfortable like it is right now. I'm winning all the time. Why would I push further? Why argue with success? Yeah, but if you think about your success, you're not letting yourself really be who you can be. You're just hanging around with people that are less than you. So it's about really allowing yourself and having the courage to take that on. Obviously, all this needs to be done step by step. I would not suggest someone just leap into it all. But it's a progressive steps that you grow. That's how you grow. And that's how you grow from becoming passionate and obsessive or excited and exuberant or whatever the words you want to use. Things you fight for that are more inferior objectives, and you reach to something a little more sublime, a little more refined, a little higher cause. And yes, you become a warrior for that. You become passionate about what your calling is in this world, passionate about how you're going to make a mark and change the world in some way, how you're going to help people, how you're going to give. You'll be focused a lot more on your capacity to give than your capacity to take. Taking is, again, one comfort zone thing. It's easy to take. You take. You're not challenged. Taking sounds also good. You're hoarding. You acquire more and more. Giving, secure people know how to give. Giving is what makes you a great person. Because you give off, you're not just taking. Taking is often a sign of a lot of insecurity. You need more and more and more. As much as you get, you're still not enough. Giving is a sign of people who are very healthy and very secure of themselves, are natural givers. Because giving for them is not, they don't become less because they give. I'm not talking about now pleasers or people who give for unhealthy reasons. I'm talking about a natural, healthy type of giving. So that, again, is another sign of the things that we're excited and passionate about. It really comes down to this. Even if you yourself not at that place yet, maybe identify. Try to see in your life, do you have anyone that you're close to? Family member, could be a grandmother or a grandparent, could be a friend, it could be a colleague, that does have a passion for things that are really higher values, more eternal values. And if you find someone like that, hang on to them for your dear life. I don't mean hang on literally. I mean to say, spend time with them. Because these things have a big impact when you're around such people. If you're around people that are similar to yourself who are consumed with nonsense, relatively speaking, so it's just going to reaffirm your own stuff and again, makes you feel comfortable perhaps, but it's not going to get you anywhere. And I guarantee you look around, you'll find someone like that. You often hear people who say, I'll never forget my grandmother and my grandfather. They had that sparkle, they had that vivacity, that energy. These things have very deep impact. But it doesn't have to be that. It could be someone else. It could be a mentor. And if you don't have someone like that, look. You have to look for it. The last thing you want is to write a script for yourself that really undermines and underestimates your own self. Because at the end of the day, you're in control of what's going to be with you. No one else is going to save you. No one's going to pull you out of there. You can't rely that someone's going to say, hey, you have such great potential, why don't you live up to it? It happens at times. It may happen at work or other situations, but you can't rely on that. So it really comes down to our own commitment to it. And coming from Hanukkah, it's a very valid, very relevant message, Because that's what it was. What is Hanukkah? You read in the prayers, you say that the Jews, the Maccabees, they were very few, but the many were conquered by the few, and the mighty were conquered by the weak. Because what they had was quality. Like I said before about light and darkness, you could have a lot of darkness, but a little light is more powerful than all the darkness because it dispels darkness. You may need a lot of light to dispel a lot of darkness, but in the area where there's darkness, if this room suddenly went completely dark and had a little flame, everyone would see it. And that little area, there'd be light. So we have to look for more light. So light is a very powerful force. What it means metaphorically in psychological terms, it means the things that you, the clarity that you have. Confusion is never a match for clarity. If you're sitting at a table and there's 5 people at the table and 4 of them are confused and one person is clear, the clear person is always going to dominate. Because it's like light and darkness. Clarity has that nature. It becomes something that you just are drawn to. You see clarity. And clarity means having a clear vision of what is important, what's a priority. You'll ever hear any people give good advice are always people who know how to achieve clarity. They let's say you have a messy situation in your life, in a relationship, or in personal life, or what should you do for work, or your whole life is falling apart, whatever it may be. What does a good advisor, a good person, a good counselor, a good coach really do? They took it all, divide and conquer. They say, okay, we have 50 problems here. They don't put it all in one big basket. You separate them. You start looking for patterns, and you start saying, okay, how do we begin? What's most overwhelming is when you have all these things and you say, I don't even know where to start. My whole life is entangled. But how do you untangle something? You don't untangle it all in one shot. You find the areas, let's say wires or thread or a ball of yarn. You untangle the things that are easier to untangle. You isolate the areas that are harder to untangle, and that's how you begin. So clarity is not achieved like overnight in one sweep, one fell swoop. Clarity is achieved step by step. You look at the situation, you say, what's number 1 that we have to deal with? And then we'll deal with number 2, and then 3. You can't deal with 50 things at once. That's what a clear-headed person, they look at something, and they say, okay, this is a problem here, but the problem has to be dissected, and we have to separate the issues. It's like, God forbid, somebody comes into an emergency room and they're bleeding. So the first thing doctors have to do is stop the bleeding. They have to identify where's it coming from. If you're just going to try to operate or do something, you may completely create more problems. So first thing you need to stop the bleeding and say, okay, let's identify what are the issues we're dealing with. 1 issue, 2 issues, 3 issues, maybe it's just 1. Maybe it's just collateral damage. How many problems in our lives could have been nipped in the bud, but once it got out of control, now you're dealing with God forbid, a cancer that's spreading all over the place. Like any destructive situation, never begin. No one gets lost in the woods in a minute. You wander off a bit, and then you don't catch yourself, and you go further and further, and suddenly, who knows where you are. Nobody begins completely lost. It all begins one step, one wrong step. Many of us don't want to deal with that one wrong step. Either we minimize it, or we ignore it, or we think we underestimate it. So it's about achieving the clarity. And that's why I go back to the clarity of understanding what you are really made of. And what you're really made of is that you're a soul that was sent to this world with a purpose to achieve great things. And great is not in numbers, and great is not in headlines, and great is not in glitz and in fireworks. Great is that what you do, only you can do, and you can accomplish with your life. And that's the thing that's most important. Everything else is secondary. Everything else is just to support, is a means to that end. So to replace the thing you should be most passionate about, which is your calling, which has to do with higher values, with some type of superficial thing, you tell me what that sounds like. That's like completely off course, off the reservation. And that's what many of us do. We want a passion, but we choose passions that are very either easy, quick fixes, burst, thrills that keep you titillated or stimulated for a little while. And you're replacing essentially the things that you should be most passionate about, which is your calling and who you are and what mark you're going to make, and are you living up your voice, your inner voice. And everybody has that inner voice. So it's really a choice, a battle between, are you going to succumb to what you do and your routines and patterns and habits, or are you going to access something that is transcendent and deeper than that? And it's not left to you alone. You need support. We all need each other to achieve this. Everybody. Even great teachers and masters, the Talmud says, who did they learn most from? So it says they learn much from their teachers. They learn more from their colleagues. But who do they learn most from? From their students. Because a teacher learns from a student. You learn from experiences. You learn from how it's received. So we live in a symbiotic world where we are not here to do it alone. Like literally, like I always give the example of a symphony. Hundreds of different instruments. Everybody's playing their instrument, but they all complement each other. You need to play your instrument, and then there's the others will complement and pick up, and we support each other. Literally like any healthy human organism, any healthy organism for that matter, including a human organism, what do you see? Hundreds, millions of different elements and systems and processes, but they work together in this symbiotic way, in a harmonious way. So it's not one, it's many, and they each have their time and their space, and they know how and the right tempo and balance. And that's the same thing with ourselves. So nothing to be ashamed of to say to someone, I need help and achieve clarity. I'm not sure, I'm not objective. I see it this way, but maybe I'm not seeing it clearly. Sometimes it takes courage to do that. Sometimes people don't want to, their pride doesn't let them do that because they think they may look bad. But on the contrary, to me, I think people look much worse when they make believe that they're perfect and they have it all figured out. That looks much worse than someone who says, you know what, here's what I think it is, but I want to run it by you. I want to get another opinion to see. Maybe I'm missing something. That to me is the healthiest type of approach. That's how you that's how you find truth. And all of us need that. Everybody, even the smartest people who have very clear picture, are the first ones that are open to go and say, listen, I need another opinion on this matter. I want to make sure I got it right. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I'm blinded to something. Maybe I'm subjective. It's the healthiest thing for a human being to be able to do that. But those that are resistant usually is a result because they've been criticized a lot, and therefore they feel that they are inadequate. And inadequate people are afraid to ask for help because they feel it'll just confirm that, you see, I'm worthless. I can't do it myself. But that's a distortion, because very, very adequate people are the first to know that they need others to help them sort things out. And you may be an expert in one area and someone else is an expert in another area. Would anyone go buy a house or go build a house without a contractor who has some experience? Or without a lawyer, without an accountant? I mean, you need to have these people who have experience, not because you're inadequate, it's because you don't have experience in that area. And the contrary, you're smart enough to know to get a good expert to come here. That's what it comes down to. Andrew Carnegie, the first billionaire in America, when he built the library, the public library system in the United States. An interesting character. So he was asked by his lawyers, what does he want written as an epitaph on his tombstone? He's buried in Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon. So he asked their suggestions, and one said the first billionaire, the builder of the public library system, the philanthropist, the this one, the that one. He had all kinds of different compliments. On his tombstone it says, and I always find this amazing, it says, a man who knew whom to hire. That's what he wrote. That takes a strong person, because he could have written about a lot of his own qualities. A man who knew whom to hire. It's a very wise statement, because it's exactly right. Those are the people who really succeed because they know it's not me, I have to find the right people. And that is even more powerful than being someone that can do it all themselves, because you find the best in each area, and that's how you achieve excellence. Whenever I see somebody trying to do it all, I mean, they may come out of inexperience, but also sometimes it comes out of insecurity. You feel like, if I don't do it all, then I'm not in control. But he was in control because he hired them. He paid them, even though they're probably superior to him. That's what good businessmen do. As they say, a man with money meets a man with experience. So a man with experience ends up with the money, and the man with the money ends up with the experience. That's the way it works. Anyway, that's not so related to our discussion. But I want to conclude with the following note. Since we're concluding Hanukkah, we've already concluded, it's already after sundown, but as I said, we're still in the spirit of it. Every night we added a flame. Each of us is an unbelievably powerful flame. By virtue of the fact that you were born, and by virtue of the fact, as the book of Proverbs says, the lamp of God, the flame of God is the soul of a human being. So our souls are flames. But like any flame, it can be a pilot flame that remains dormant and trapped and asleep somewhere inside of you, waiting to be released. It's our mission, and this should be our first passion of all, is to get that flame going, to fan the flame, to be aware of it, to nurture it, and let it shine. And what flames do is exactly that. They shine, they illuminate. They're clarity. And they make things warm. So they enter into a dark and cold world, and they brighten it and warm it up. Imagine that wherever you go, every step you take, whoever you meet, when you come around, people's lives brighten up and get warmed by you. That's a pretty, I would say, darn good thing to be involved in. And that should be on the top of your list of what's passionate. You could say, people say, when I'm in your presence, I always feel uplifted. I feel warmed. I feel loved. I feel all the positive feelings. The opposite, which I don't even want to mention, is obviously someone says, when I'm in your presence, I feel drained and weak, and they get depressed, and I'd rather not see you again, Now, most people are never going to say that to you if you're that type of person, because unless they're rude. But it's interesting to know what people feel when they see you. So it's going to be hard to figure that out, because people are not going to usually tell you. I wouldn't tell someone if I felt that that's what they're doing. Maybe I would hint to it, and I would send them to someone else who would tell them that, maybe. Because there's no point, we're not talking about hurting anyone, we're talking about just being aware. But the good news is that we don't have to be stuck there. Obviously, we project negative energy when we feel negative. You ever go to a party, and as soon as you walk the door, the hosts are probably at war with each other, or something going on. You just feel a vibe, and it usually spills down from the top. If the hosts are that way, then the waiters are that way, and the staff is that way, and this and this, the whole place is like, you feel tension. You can tell right away when you feel there's the people from the top are happy and giving, and there's no that tense state. You feel it. You just feel it. I'm sure you've had situations like that, and because that's how it is. That's what people project where they're at. So we want to access that part of us that illuminates, that warms, that embraces, makes people feel empowered. I always say to myself, whenever people come and see me for advice or counseling or whatever it may be, to me it's always one goal, that when they leave, after they see me, they should smile a little better than when they entered. I always shoot for that. And not superficially. That doesn't always happen, because, to be honest, some situations are very difficult. But still, even difficult situations can feel a little less difficult. And if you make that your objective, that's what you try to do. And then you have to access within yourself that strength as well, not let yourself succumb to negative thinking and depression. I've been in situations where I speak to some people and I don't feel there's hope. Even though I'm an eternal optimist and I always feel there's some glimmer of hope, sometimes you don't see it. Sometimes I see a situation, not because there's no hope. I see this person just their own worst enemy that they don't see it. And they'll destroy their lives before really do what's right. And I've seen it, unfortunately. I've seen it in broken marriages, and I've seen other people get so consumed with their way of seeing things. And then, sometimes you read them the riot act, and really tough, and say, you're going to lose your family, you're going to lose everything if you don't wake up. And sometimes nothing works. I'm a believer that you always something works. You always plant a seed, but sometimes you don't always merit to see the seed blossom. So I've seen that, and even then I always hold open the possibility. But you have to also be realistic. There are things that you have to choose your battles. There are things like, I tell people sometimes, there's no point for you to come see me again. I can't help you anymore. And it's not because I'm not a miracle worker. I think we've reached the end of the line. They say, no, you could help. I said, look, I told you I can't help you because you're not budging. Now, sometimes that motivates them, sometimes it doesn't. But the point is that at the end of the day, we can be our own worst enemies, but what I'm focusing on is that we also can be our own best friends. And that's by accessing the light of your soul and the warmth of the soul. And it lights and warms you and lights, illuminates people around you. So as we go from Hanukkah, so we finished lighting the candles last night, and today, the 8th candle, but now begins the rest of the year is to light your soul's flame. That mitzvah continues. So the actual flames we had, to give us like a launch. So you get 8 days of giving you the tools. But now comes the work. It's not like Hanukkah's over and now no more lighting candles. Now you're lighting flames, but you're lighting your soul's flame and you're lighting other people's flame. And as we know, flames light flames. One flame touches another. That's how it is. It's like words from the heart enter the heart. And they begin to have a perpetual ripple effect. That's the key thing to remember. And so God bless you all to be able to actually become warriors. What do we call it? Radical warriors for goodness and kindness. I like that, radical. To become radical. There's enough radicalism in the world that's going the wrong way. In zealots and religious fanatics. And people who unfortunately kill others and kill themselves in the name of that. Time to have a radical revolution toward good and kindness. That's where it comes down. That we should be as passionate about goodness and kindness as they are passionate about death and destruction. We should be passionate about goodness and kindness and the positive things as sometimes we're passionate about some of these little nonsensical stuff that we get involved in. Whether it's soap operas, or am I going to go through the whole list of vices and addictions and all the stuff that the list is quite long. And I remember there was a website called, I don't know if it still exists, it was called uselessinformation.com. Very interesting stuff, but it was completely useless. And I used to go to that website just to see, and a lot of people going there, they loved this useless information. So it was like interesting facts, but like intentionally, okay, it's a nice fact, and what do you do with it? So I started thinking the internet has a lot of that type of stuff, a lot of useless information. It's a lot of good information, but you have to focus and make sure that you are the channeler of ambassadors of light. That's what we have to be, walking flames, walking menorahs. So everyone, a very illuminating week and year and life, a very warming one. And I want to again congratulate, and I'm very happy for our friend Shalom Mordechai, Halevi ben Rivka and ben Avram Aaron Rabashkin, and may he be an example for all of us, that we all get out of our prisons and find our emancipation through the expressions of our souls. And the biggest prison is sometimes your own body and the traps of your own thinking, your own fears, to free ourselves from all of that. That's the Hanukkah power. Everyone have a very beautiful week, and we will be here next Wednesday as well. And we continue on. If you don't have your email address, please leave it with us, because that's how we communicate. We send out firstly weekly and timely, in general, good messages. Also on social media, all our channels are being covered, hopefully, including here, broadcast now on Facebook and on YouTube and a little on Instagram. Okay, so there we go. I trust the young generation is taking care of this. I'm totally overwhelmed by all these different. I don't even know. At some point, I'm not clear what the difference is between one and the next. Thank God for the young. I feel young in spirit. Don't get me wrong, but you know what I mean. So everyone, a very beautiful week. Great to see you all, both here and in cyberspace. All of you, like I always say, bathing in your bubble baths, in your comfort zones, and watching me instead of coming out here in the cold and braving it. But wherever you are in the world, and we shall see each other, and pleasant and great occasions. Everyone have a good, blessed week. Thank you.